Welcome back. It is always a good day when I wake up, I give thanks, and I know that today is a day that I am allowed to introduce you to another fascinating person with quite a story. This one deals with deep grief, but it also deals with beautiful hope and something that came out of this very painful experience for this woman. So I'm going to introduce her in just a moment, but first, just a couple quick housekeeping things. Oh my gosh, the show is growing every single week when I go on and I look at the back end. Last week I did the countries. I'm just going to do a quick shout out to my top cities. So Chicago, thank you. Oh my gosh, the downloads in Chicago are stunning. Minneapolis, St. Paul, Twin Cities showing up for me. Gangbusters, of course, San Diego, my hometown. Stony Plain, love it, up in Alberta. Victoria, Dallas, Washington, D.C., Toronto, Charlotte, North Carolina, Lawrence, Kansas. I don't know what's going on, but I love you guys. Thank you for downloading. And Sydney, Australia, one of my bigger markets. A lot of people down in Australia are really kind of vibing with the show. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, thank you for the follows and joining us. It's a lovely community, especially over on Facebook. And of course, the 5-star reviews for the podcast and the book are always very welcome. My guest today, her name is Laing Rikkers. And Laing is, oh my goodness, just highly educated, Harvard, Columbia. She is a medical device investor, which we're going to have her tell you all about that. She works in the field of sleep apnea, which I know a lot of people suffer from, and some real tragedies come because of that. So, Laing, welcome to the next room, and thank you for coming on to share your story, which I want to hold this up for our YouTube fans. Morning Leaves, Reflections on Loss, Grief, and Connection, a beautiful book of poetry from Laing. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's really nice to be here.
Laing, boy, your story is so multi-layered. So talk to me about your sister Ginna and what happened with Ginna and why you came to become an author now and write this gorgeous book.
Sure. So I'll back up a little bit and give some background on my professional life because
Please
it
do.
informed the conversations I was having with my sister. So I, as you mentioned, have been a longtime medical device investor and most recently co-founded a business called Prosomnus Sleep Technologies. And it is a business that makes an oral device to treat people who have obstructive sleep apnea. And through that, I obviously got fairly familiar with the disease and the symptoms that surround it, which are the main ones are snoring and daytime sleepiness. And so I learned that my sister was snoring loudly enough that she was sleeping in her own room. And she was very tired. She needed to take a nap every day. And, she had moodiness, which is also a symptom. And so I raised the subject with her and said, this is a serious condition and, why don't you get tested? And she was familiar with the business. She actually was a significant investor and a big believer in what we were doing. And, I sent her the name of a local specialist who was just a few miles from her. And for, whatever reason, it might have been busyness or not thinking it was very serious or a little bit of younger sister defiance, I'm not sure. But she unfortunately never got tested and continued to suffer. And really sadly, in December of 2019, went into atrial fibrillation and they weren't able to get her out of it. And there may have been something else that triggered it or was going on that was undiagnosed, but she was young, she was 46. And so they needed to do an autopsy to understand what had happened. And they found that she had a very enlarged heart, which is very consistent with undiagnosed and untreated sleep apnea. So it was horrible. It was a really, really difficult time. And obviously sort of having the insight that I'd had, and made it even harder, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so explain for the audience exactly what happens with this intense sleep apnea. So we know that snoring, daytime sleepiness, moodiness, those are all symptoms. But what is happening when the person is actually sleeping that
Sure.
that causes what could cause sudden death, which in the case of Ginna happened?
Yeah. So what happens is that the airway closes. So the soft tissue in the neck and throat falls back and it blocks the airway. And the drop in oxygen is what is really dangerous for the patient. And, that's what's putting a lot of pressure on the heart, because it then has to work that much harder to pump the oxygen that is in the system around. And it's got a ton of comorbidities. So atrial fibrillation, hypertension, a number of different cardiovascular diseases also correlated with diabetes and stroke and cancer. So it certainly reduces day-to-day quality of life. People don't perform very well. They don't feel great. And then of course, longer term, there's, the shortening of lifespan. That my sister's situation was fairly extreme, but it certainly is damaging, all of the patients. And it's extremely common. I think it's one thing that I'm trying to spend my time now educating people about, is it's 1 in 5 adults globally. So that's about 1 billion people. That's more people than have cancer. And 80% of people are undiagnosed. So it's one of these really challenging situations where you've got people who don't understand the seriousness. I think there's a lot of people who think snoring is, funny or something to sort of poke at, but don't understand that it's the sign of a blocked airway. And so, looking to help educate people that, some people are afraid that, of getting tested because they have heard that they need to go, do a sleep study in a sleep lab. And some people do that, and sometimes that's necessary. But one of the great benefits of COVID was that home sleep tests are now reimbursed and widely acceptable, and widely accepted in the medical community. So that's increasingly available, and makes it easier for people to at least know what their condition is. And then another reason I think people don't get diagnosed is that the sort of traditional treatment is a CPAP machine, which is the mask and hose.
Right.
And a lot of people, for understandable reasons, really resist that. It's you can't cure sleep apnea. It has to be treated, and it needs to be treated nightly. And so looking down, the barrel of wearing a mask nightly for the rest of your life, I think puts a lot of people off, and they just sort of put their head in the sand and, hope for the best. Which is one of the reasons that the co-founders and I have been very passionate about building Resomnus, because it is a treatment that's really simple and easy for patients. And it looks like Invisalign. It's a clear device that goes in the mouth. It holds the jaw forward at a position that's set by prescription, covered by insurance. It's custom for every patient, and it makes it simple and easy. Just clean it with a toothbrush and water, and it's highly effective. We've done a lot of clinical testing on it. It's our biggest customer is the U.S. Army. That's what a lot of
Wow.
soldiers use. So we're excited about it. It's a young company. It's we're newly public, went public in December, and just really trying to get the word out and let people know that this is something that's serious and that they ought to be paying attention to, and that getting diagnosed and getting treated is easier than it's ever been.
Wow. And you're living proof, had your sister maybe taken her situation more serious. It's so shocking, because you're right. Snoring is just sort of, poke the person next to you, wake them up so they stop snoring. Or in really hardcore cases, you hear it all the time. Well, I go sleep in the other room. And so we just kind of naturally think that that's part of how we sleep at night, that snoring is normal, but it's not. Wow, good for you for the work you're doing. And on top of going through all the deep grief that you went through, I mean, 46, my goodness. Was Ginna otherwise in decent health? Was she active? Was she the normal weight? I'm just curious about that as well.
She was heavier than her normal weight. She had had a child a number of years before and then had trouble losing the weight, and that was probably contributing. You end up in metabolic syndrome. The comorbidities start getting tangled, and it gets difficult to sort of pull them apart. But certainly weight does contribute to greater likelihood of sleep apnea. She wasn't a drinker, but alcohol also, age. Typically, it's more typically found in men, although women tend to be more underdiagnosed as a percent of the patients. So I think if anyone has any of the symptoms or someone that they love, to speak with their doctor is really what we would recommend.
Okay.
And if you don't get, some doctors are less informed than others as well. So if your primary care doctor doesn't seem to know that much or isn't that responsive, keep asking. I think it's important to make sure that people are getting it really checked out and taking it seriously.
So Ginna passes in 2019, right before the world shut down.
Yeah.
So now you're in deep grief. You've lost your only sibling, your baby sister. I love what your daughter said. So please share what your daughter said about this to kind of maybe stoke a fire and have you follow through on morning leaves.
Yeah, so as background, I had started writing a journal every morning, and I was looking to sort of express myself and sort of
Just after, I'm sorry, just after Ginna passed?
yes,
Okay.
really during lockdown. I think I had
Okay.
time. I was looking to explore a little more creativity. I read the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, which is a classic, great one. And she recommends a practice she calls morning pages. And so I started that, and I found it really helpful. And so I started writing what really became the core of Morning Leaves. And actually the title Morning Leaves is sort of a nod to morning pages as well. And I started writing, and then I ended up typing up some of this, and I spoke to my daughter about it and said, this is something I'm working on. I think I'm gonna make it a book. And she said, is this one of those things that you're really gonna do, or is it just something you talk about and it's gonna fall by the wayside? And it was quite a mirror. It was and she wasn't being mean. She was right. I actually had talked about a lot of things over the years that I would, love to have done, and for whatever reason never saw through. But it was one of those moments that's sort of like a lightning bolt. I was like, oh gosh, I really, as much as anything, I have two children, to model for them that if you set out to do something, to follow through. And it also maybe not reminded me, but it made it clear to me that this actually was something that was important, that even though it was hard and different and new, that it was something that I felt passionate about seeing through to the end. So I appreciated her little nudge there.
Kids will do that. I have two. I have two as well. So
Yes.
I get the little fire lit on my fanny several times.
Mhm.
Beautiful book. It's called Morning Leaves, Reflections on Loss, Grief, and Connection. Of course, I'll have all of Lang's, links and everything, so you won't have to go searching for it. But your dedication. After I read this, I would like you to pick out maybe one of your favorite pieces from the book, if you would, and read it. This book is dedicated to Ginna, who abruptly left too early, cracked me open, and whispered, "Today, now," which is all about, being here now. And embracing this moment, because truly it is the only moment we have. You know, we can talk about what's coming down the pike 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years from now. But quite frankly, we may not be here to enjoy it in this physical sense. Or we can look back on yesterday, it's gone. So I love that introduction. So would you honor us with reading one of your poems, please?
Sure. Um, I chose one that really was part of my experience of grieving, and it's called Cactus. So today, a cactus, the kind you see in westerns, big, spiky, majestic, yet inside quite lonely, alone. Thorns on the outside to shield the soft flesh within, guarded, buffered, distracting to ensure that you don't see the ache, but it's there. Inside the tall stalk and into the big arms, in the beating sun and the clear, cold nights, by itself. Occasionally putting out a beautiful flower to invite a bluebird to come sit on its shoulder, to be together for a bit.
I love the nature that is involved with this book. So we're on lockdown. You needed to get out and grieve, and so you chose to be outside. I think a lot of people did. You know, we all slowed down. We had to kind of come inside, but go outside as well, and do things on our own. So everything in this book has to do with nature. I absolutely love that. Did you know that that's where your poetry in this book that's dedicated to Ginna, did you know that's where it was going to go?
No, no, not at all. And I really hadn't set when I wrote the poetry, I wasn't thinking of it originally as a book. I really was just expressing a lot of what was in my head, and in fact, I have to say a lot of what I heard, in that sort of quiet morning before you've spoken, I have this, actually the chair that's behind me, this cozy chair, and I would get my journal out and just sort of sit in that space between sleep and wakefulness and sort of listen to what I could hear. And so it all came out as these botanical metaphors of things that I was thinking about myself and reflecting on, and that was just what came. I was surrounded by, I live in Southern California, I live in San Diego as well, and it is so beautiful, and it was so particularly beautiful, I thought, during the pandemic, right? Because without the cars and the pollution, the sky was that electric blue, and it was really healing and really beautiful to be outside and to slow down and see things, and to be able to be on foot in places, you walk down the middle of the road, which normally, you know, wouldn't even think of, and be able to just see different things than you'd seen before. And so I think that was what I was steeping in, and it came out in the work.
I love it. Botanical metaphors. That's exactly what it is. And, I don't think, I mean, this is very unique. When I received this book and I opened it up, I felt like it was so yummy. It was so beautiful. And it was like each poem is so different, but you're taking these reflections of your grief too, and transformative through nature and talking about these different things. It's really a beautiful book. Be a great thing to give to someone who has had a loss. It's a great grief book, but yet not so mired in that sadness and that deep grief. It's actually very hopeful because it's beautiful the way that you've expressed yourself. How interesting. Now that so you're fully involved in the medical side or this research side, and trying to get that going, but yet now you're an author. are you going to write more? Like, did this open you up to the point where you're like, oh, I love doing this?
I do love doing it. It is really fun. And I think one of the biggest surprises for me was how expansive it was and how it tapped into, I don't know what, we'll sort of say maybe the other side of my brain. And it, it just enriched everything about my life. It made my work better. I found that I was more thoughtful and creative and patient, and I felt better, um and I had fun. I mean, it was really enjoyable. The woman who the painter who did all of the work in the book, and there are about 78 or 80 paintings in the book that were all original for it. Working with her was just delightful because she's so talented, and she really connected with the words, and did just a lovely job reflecting that in her work, and we just really enjoyed playing with it. And there's a lot of symbolism in the pieces that we picked and where we put them, and it was just everything about it was fun. So my hope is I have started writing another book. It's not at all finished, but I have another one that is going, and she and I would love to do something else together. And I think we're just waiting to see how this does. And if I describe it as, do we have permission to do it again? Does the world want to see more of this or not? And we'll see. I mean, the book comes out May 16th, and so it's all coming up soon. But I hope people enjoy it, and we certainly enjoyed putting it together for the world.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the artist because it's Kelly Leah Ratting. And with each poem in the book is this just extraordinary painting. So, you're purchasing art in two ways. You're purchasing the art of the beautiful expression of your words, and then also with it, you have these incredible paintings. So it really is, it's beautiful that you two could collaborate on this. It's really quite lovely. And how did you find her, or did she find you, or were you friends?
We did not know each other before. I was so new to all of this. I really was making it up as I was going. And I thought, well, but because of the words, I knew I needed a botanical artist of some sort. So, well, where do you find a botanical artist? I Googled botanical art.
Wow.
And there is an American Academy of Botanical Artists. Who
Hmm.
knew? And they have, I don't know, call it 1,000 members, and every member has a little thumbnail. And I've flipped through them all, and I needed somebody because of the text who not only could do beautiful, flowers and leaves, but I needed somebody who could also do the thorns and the roots and some of the more challenging and sort of grittier things. And I saw some of her work that incorporated that, and just thought this could be a really great fit. So I reached out to her. I found her online and looked at some of her other work and just loved everything that she did, and reached out and said, have you ever illustrated a book? And she said, I have. I said, would you like to see my book? And she said, sure. And I sent it to her, and she got back to me quickly and said, yeah, this is what I'd like to do. And so we've been in touch, call it daily, for 2 years now. And so we've been we've gotten to be friends, and it's fun. It's been a really nice collaboration and friendship, and she's been just wonderful to work with. So it would be fun to get to work with her again.
I love that. It's really a beautiful book. Um, Talk to me about your sister. Tell me a funny Ginna story, something that just comes up in your mind, because the book is dedicated to her. This podcast show today, I feel like she is with us in spirit and has been helping you along on this journey. So talk to me about your sister.
Oh, my sister, she's just this incredible spirit. Probably the thing that most sticks out with me is she was about, I don't know, maybe 30, and was very successful. She'd also gone to Harvard, she'd gotten her MBA at Columbia, and she, had all these great jobs in New York City. And what does she do? She sends out an email to all of her friends and says, what are your favorite cities east of the Mississippi? She was living in New York at the time. And she got a list, and she and her dog hopped in her car and disappeared for 6 weeks. And they drove around all over the East Coast, Southeast.
Wow.
And my parents and I got an email one day saying, I've rented a place in Nashville, I'm moving to Nashville. And we're like, we don't know anyone in Nashville. And she's like, I love it, I'm going. And she just settled there. She ended up creating her own life there and met her husband and had a child and was really ingrained in the whole community and ended up getting her PhD while she was, she just was super happy. But she was just one of those people who was able to sort of self-direct and go, this is, I want to take a turn that's different than what I know, and I'm going to explore it and be brave and creative. And I was really excited for her. I think she was very happy there. So, but it was really unusual. All of the rest of us were like, what are you doing? So it was great.
It's a great Ginna story. That alone tells me so much about her courage and bravery, and I'm just going for it. She just sounds like she was, pedal to the metal. I'm going to go have some fun and explore. And how many people get stuck and afraid to try anything new. And here she is taking off with her dog and ends up in Nashville. Great city.
Yeah.
So, oh my goodness, I could talk to you all day. Morning Leaves, Reflections on Loss, Grief, and Connection. This beautiful book that you kind of co-authored with a painter. I got to get her name again. Kelly Leah Radding is the young lady that painted the beautiful paintings that go with Lang's book. Would you read another one of your poems for us?
I would love to. All right. This one is called Scorched. Raging fire, whipping winds, choking smoke. I am scorched, blackened, a searing gash within. I am down, flattened, breathless, felled. And then a small voice from the kitchen, and by some combination of instinct, will, miracle, a green sprout pushes its way up through the ashes.
Ooh, I feel that one, especially with our planet being on fire right after all of that was going on with COVID. And then it was just extraordinary. And that's it, a little sprout pushing up through all of the debris and craziness. Wow, beautiful. You are so talented. What can we do, or what can I do to help you gain some awareness to the sleep apnea, the severe sleep apnea? I know we can put a link with this. Let's circle back to that, because
Sure.
I really feel that is truly one of the most important things, and the message that you're here to deliver is to stop the next person possibly from checking out of their life way too early because they just didn't hear the alarm bell.
Yeah. Well, my website is my first and last name.com, and on there are some resources for people about obstructive sleep apnea. There's some links to some of the different associations and to ProSomnus to learn more about signs and symptoms and what one can do if they are concerned, or if a loved one is concerned. And also in the back of the book, I've got those same resources. I think the first thing really to do would be to speak with your doctor. I think the other piece of it is people who have obstructive sleep apnea don't necessarily know it themselves. It's often their bed partner, because when you're snoring, you don't know that you're snoring. Sometimes people will sort of gasp and wake up. That is another symptom, or they'll wake up with dry mouth. That's another possibility. But a lot of times it's really somebody else who's witnessing it. And a lot of those folks struggle to convince the person who's suffering, because the sufferer doesn't see or hear it themselves. So sometimes, I hear stories of people, recording it, or, trying to do different things to raise the awareness. And I hope that my book will reinforce this notion of self-care, and is a tool for people who are having trouble convincing someone that they love that this is a serious thing to, look into. And I know some of the clinicians that I work with are excited to have copies in their waiting rooms for that reason, because it is one of those diseases that people resist getting treated. They're just not aware, unfortunately, of the potential consequences. And so if the book can serve in that way, I think that would be fantastic. And I think just people talking about it, and I joke sometimes that I don't have to talk about much at cocktail parties anymore, because when it's 1 in 5 people, we all know people who are dealing with this.
Oh, yeah.
And so, and if 4 out of 5 of, are, not getting, or sorry, well, 80% of the 1 in 5 are not diagnosed yet. We're dealing with a lot of people who are wondering, questioning, resisting, or just simply unaware. So I think, if your listeners can be thinking about it, talking about it, and if they want to reach out, there's a way on my website to do that. I'm happy to also share other resources with people. So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to get the word out.
Fantastic. Laing Rikkers is my guest today. It's Morning Leaves, Reflections on Loss, Grief, and Connection. Gorgeous book here for you YouTube fans. You can see how beautiful it is. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I thought it would be kind of cool for you to take out the show before my close comes on, and do one more reading before I thank the listeners for tuning in today.
Sure. Well, maybe the nicest thing would be to read what is on the back of the book, because as you say, my desire is that it does address grief, but also leaves people feeling that there is a path through it. And so the book closes with, "And in the end, my grief grew roots, took hold, and blossomed into something beautiful."
Gorgeous. Thank you so much for coming on The Next Room. The Next Room, where death is dinner conversation. I like to cover everything regarding the next journey that we're going to be taking, and the journey that we're in this moment right now. Laing, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know that you're a busy woman, and I really appreciate it. It's beyond awareness today. It's for so many multiple purposes of what you've got going on, as far as letting us know that you can pivot from being very sciencey into this beautiful poetry, gorgeous book that you've done, and also to honor your sister Ginna and to kind of crack wide open with your grief. So thank you for being here today. It really is, it's been a wonderful show. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for including me. I love being here.